Our next speaker will be Mr. Bhuchung Tsering, and he is the vice president of the International Campaign for Tibet, and he fled with his family in 1960 to India in the wake of China's invasion. He received his education in India and had been a reporter for many years before he came to Washington to play a critical role to keep Tibetan issue alive in this town with a short memory. Now, Bhuchung, please.
Is it on?
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Thank you.
Maybe not. Go ahead.
I appreciate this opportunity to share our perspective on this topic, the ethnic crisis facing China's leadership, with my brothers in the other communities in our common struggle for the rights and dignity of our people. I would like to address this topic in 3 parts with reference to Tibet. First, an update of the situation. Second, what are some recent developments that has alerted us to this possible increase in increase or the possible development of the Tibetan situation to a critical level, and thirdly, our recommendations on what could be done about these. The problem in Tibet is a subject that the International Campaign for Tibet has been seized in our 25 years of existence. This is most recently indicated by 2 of our reports, one of which I have here, Storm in the Grasslands, and another one about the Chinese policies in Tibet that is indicating elements of cultural genocide. This report is about what some of you might have heard about recent developments in Tibet, the self-immolations that has happened. So far, more than 90 such, in fact 99 from our calculation, self-immolations have occurred, with 3 of them happening just in this month, January. All these indicate what the situation in Tibet is. And for those of you who are interested, these reports are available on our website, if you so like. In his first speech, Chinese Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, Xi Jinping, on November 15, said, and I quote, "In the new situation, our party faces many severe challenges." He explained different challenges, but from my perspective, the self-immolations in Tibet is certainly one of those severe challenges that is facing the Chinese leadership today. China's attempt to deal with the self-immolation in the way they have done so far, which is by use of force, by trying to sort of threaten people, by trying to clamp down in Tibet, by making life for the Tibetan people more miserable, has not resolved the issue. And the continued self-immolation reports that we get from Tibet is an indication of that. So what are some of the recent Chinese policies, approaches that are sort of leading to this problem? There are 2 broad issues there. First, one of the possible solution choices that the Chinese leadership seem to have considered to resolve the Tibetan problem, or in fact the problem of what they call the ethnic minorities, is by doing away with the limited constitutional rights for people like us. Since 2004, there have been a debate among Chinese scholars about doing away with what is called the identification of nationalities as separate, and doing away with those privileges that are enshrined in the Chinese constitution for the minorities. However, in December 2011, when we heard Mr. Tu Wei-chun, our Chinese Vice Minister of the United Front Works Department, himself write about this issue, voicing his feeling that the current nationalities problems that China faces are on account of the separate policies for nationalities. And when he suggested doing away with them, including on how ethnicity is identified on government-issued identity cards, we realized that there is a very distinct possibility of Chinese authorities doing away with this. For those of you who may not know, Mr. Tu Wei-chun is not just one of those Chinese officials. He is the lead Chinese person responsible for the Tibetan issue on the Chinese side, and he has been the key person in the talks with the envoys of the Dalai Lama, which stopped in 2010. Therefore, it's one thing for Chinese scholars who have been debating about this possibility, but when a senior Chinese official started doing this, it is a dangerous development. So far, his statement has not been followed by any policy changes. We saw his statement came in December 2011. There was the meeting of the National People's Congress and the CPPCC in March of 2012. More importantly, there was a party congress in November 2012. At none of these fora, we saw any signs of the officials implementing this policy. So for a moment, at least, it seems to indicate that there is a division in the Chinese leadership about how to deal with the nationality issue and how to deal with this specific issue. So we should continue to sort of be alert to this situation so that we can deter the Chinese leadership from changing this policy. Now, secondly, there have been some blatant cases of racial discrimination at the Chinese official level that is leading to a possible deterioration of the situation in Tibet, which might lead to a crisis in which the Chinese leadership has to face. First, today, while in Chinese towns and areas, the Chinese people have comparatively more freedom than in the past. In Tibetan areas, we see this increasing clampdown, and the entire Tibetan area is in fact turned into one big prison. There's heavy security clampdown, and as I speak, many monasteries are under total lockdown situation with people not being allowed to conduct their daily religious practice or even movement. Secondly, and this one the Chinese people, if they are here, mainland Chinese people, they would be familiar with. In recent years, the Chinese government has simplified the application for passports, and today an average Chinese can get their passport within a week or so with simple application process. But in the case of the Tibetan people, there has been an increased strengthening of Chinese application process, and it has made it virtually impossible for any Tibetan to get their passport, even for genuine reasons. Tibetans have to follow a different system of passport application, and I have no information that any new passports have been issued to Tibetans in recent past. Far worse, in areas like within the Tibet Autonomous Region, we have reports about Chinese authorities confiscating existing passports that Tibetans have, thus virtually denying them the movement of travel. Thirdly, Xinhua reported recently about an increase in tourists in Tibetan areas, particularly in Lhasa, and they in fact quoted a figure of 6.5 million tourists visiting Lhasa in 2012. That's an interesting figure. But if you compare that with how the movement of Tibetan people have been restricted, even within Tibetan areas, then you realize how the feelings of the Tibetan people are affected. Lhasa is supposed to be the spiritual center of the Tibetan people. It's the Mecca for the Tibetan people. And today we are in a situation, not just Tibetan from outside like us, but Tibetans from within Tibet have difficulty in visiting Lhasa, or going from one village to another. We have had reports from northeastern Tibet that an average Tibetan there has to go through 4 permission process to go on their pilgrimage to Lhasa. And that's a problem. And then we hear about the Chinese authorities having amended the criminal procedure law code and putting emphasis on protection of human rights. But at the same time, they have strengthened laws that curtails the rights of the Tibetan people, so much so that today Tibetans are being imprisoned for sole accusation that they have been involved with someone, self-immolation or other. Just today, December 31st, we've had to report that the Chinese authorities have sentenced one Tibetan to death and another to more 10 years of imprisonment just because they have been accused of being involved with self-immolation. So in this sort of a situation, you can imagine how the Tibetan people are feeling and why we feel that there's certainly going to be an ethnic crisis which the Chinese authorities have to be responsible for. President Hu Jintao, who is in his last 2 months of leadership as the nominal president, has left behind a legacy of suppression of Tibetans, lack of foresight to deal with the Tibetan issue, disregard of avenues that will really lead to stability for the People's Republic of China, leave alone the interest of the Tibetan people. So what are our recommendations? And I have 5 of them. First, China should heed the call of the international community, including by the United Nations, the United States, and the European Union, to address the deep underlying issues that are responsible for the self-immolation, and not to use heavy security measures and suppression of human rights. Secondly, the United States should urge Chinese leadership to reevaluate the stability maintenance approach. This is not the solution. Thirdly, the United States should call on China to halt the rampant detention of Tibetans who are being accused of aiding in the self-immolation. This is like a saying that we have in Tibet, and even the Chinese might have, to kill the sheep, to threaten the goat or something like that. Fourthly, America should demand that there is this principle of reciprocity applied in terms of access to Tibetan areas. Today, American diplomats have difficult time having access to Tibetan areas, whereas Chinese diplomats as well as Chinese journalists have a free access here in the United States. This should be changed. Fifthly, the international community should recognize that the situation in Tibet constitutes a systematic violation of human rights, targeting the Tibetan culture, religion, and identity in ways that reveal elements of cultural genocide. And they should use this language in general comments as well as in the interventions with Chinese officials. We believe that the new leadership in China has an opportunity to alter the situation and to make the situation better, principally for the peoples like the Tibetans or the Uyghurs or the Mongols, but more importantly for China's own future. Xi Jinping said during his acceptance speech in November 15, and I quote, "It's the people who create history. The masses are the real heroes. Our strength comes from the people and masses." I believe that Tibetan people are really creating history today, and Beijing might want to listen before it's too late. How the new Chinese leadership will respond to the crisis in Tibet is something that we are watching today. Thank you so much.